There is a moment in this job where a person kneels beside a device built specifically to kill them, reaches in with a small pair of cutters, and chooses one wire over another, knowing that the choice cannot be taken back. He does this for a living. Not once, regularly. And by the end of this video, you will meet 14 more people whose ordinary working day looks nothing like anyone else's Tuesday. Ask any technician what the job actually feels like from the inside, and almost none of them describe fear. They describe a narrowing of focus so complete that everything outside the device simply stops existing for a while, which sounds almost peaceful until you remember what it is focused on. There you see 15 more jobs, none of them repeated from anything on this channel before. New continents, new dangers, and at least 2 of them exist because somebody at some point decided that yes, this is worth doing for money. Same rule as always, these are not stunts and not adventurers showing off. They are jobs. People clock in, do this, and clock out, assuming the day goes the way it is supposed to. And unlike the first 15, almost none of these jobs share a single industry. There is no common employer, no shared union, no single training pipeline. What connects a bomb technician to a submersible pilot to a snake handler is only the shape of the risk itself, repeated in a different costume each time. Therefore, don't dip back in a road, into the journey of a failed attempt. You can't become a film. Explosive ordnance disposal technicians approach devices built by somebody else, with no manual, no guarantee the device is what it appears to be, and often very little time. The season is, the work is now done by robot. A remote unit extends an arm, moves the object, or fires a disruptor round that destroys the device without a human standing near it. This is why the job has become safer over the decades, not because the devices got less dangerous, but because the distance between the person and the danger got larger. The disruptor itself is not a bomb. It fires a precise jet of water or a solid slug fast enough to destroy the device's internal wiring before it can complete its own circuit. And choosing the exact angle to fire it from is its own specialized skill, because get the angle wrong, and the disruptor can trigger the very thing it was meant to prevent. But robots fail, get stuck, or cannot reach the angle needed, and then somebody walks in wearing a suit heavy enough to slow a limb and still not guarantee survival at close range. That walk alone toward an object built to hurt whoever approaches it is the single image that defines the trade. Technicians rarely describe the walk itself as the hardest part of the job. Most say the hardest part happens afterward, driving home and trying to have an ordinary evening with people who have no real way to understand what the previous hour actually involved. Training is long and mostly about patience. The rule technicians repeat most often is that there is no such thing as being in a hurry. Rushing is how the job goes wrong, and the job going wrong does not usually give a second attempt. And most of the job, statistically, is paperwork and false alarms. A suspicious bag left on a train platform is usually exactly that, a bag. The training exists for the small fraction of calls where it is not, and the discipline is treating every single call as if it might be the one, because you do not get to find out which kind it is until you are already there. Number 2, runs on ice that is doing the calculating for you. Ice road truckers drive fully loaded rigs across frozen lakes and rivers in the Canadian North and in Siberia, on routes that exist for only a few weeks each winter. The ice is measured constantly. A certain thickness clears a light vehicle, more clears a loaded truck. Drivers watch the ice ahead of them flex slightly under the weight, a visible wave moving with the vehicle, and are taught that if the wave gets ahead of the truck, that is the moment to be somewhere else. Doors are often left unlatched on purpose. If the ice gives way, the seconds available to get out are the only safety feature that matters. And everybody on these roads has a story about somebody who did not get out in time. Trucks keep enormous distances from each other, because 2 heavy vehicles close together multiply the load on the same patch of ice. The entire season's supply run for some remote communities happens in this narrow window, which is why the trucks keep moving even when the drivers would rather not. But for some of these communities, this narrow season is the only affordable way heavy goods arrive at all. The alternative is flying everything in at a cost that can be many times higher, which is the plain economic reason drivers keep crossing ice they know is not entirely trustworthy. Weather changes the calculation constantly. A sudden thaw can close a route that was safe the previous morning, and drivers rely on constant radio updates from others already on the ice, because the surface itself gives almost no visible warning before it stops holding. The loneliest stretch of any run is also the longest one, hours with no other truck in sight and no cell signal, which means a breakdown here is not simply an inconvenience, it is a wait, in the cold, for however long it takes somebody else to notice you are overdue. Number 3 works with an animal that can kill in minutes, on purpose, at close range, all day. Phantominium's dispute and most obvious anti-venom industry, along with a smaller amount used in medical research. A handler pins the snake gently behind the head, guides its fangs onto the rim of the container, and lets it bite down. The venom itself is worth a great deal, and a single facility processes thousands of extractions a year, because antivenom has to be made from the venom of the actual species it treats, which means somebody has to keep doing this by hand. Mere Capture Edinburgh will be passing back towards it and repeatedly over months, on a schedule designed to let venom glands recover between sessions, because a program that damages the animal defeats its own purpose. The entire supply chain depends on keeping these specific snakes alive and healthy for years, not on using them up. New handlers spend a long apprenticeship simply watching before they are ever allowed near a live cobra themselves. Because the single most dangerous person in this line of work is not the snake, it is a confident beginner. Every instructor in this trade repeats some version of the same lesson on day 1. The cobra is not trying to hurt you specifically. It is only ever reacting to what your hands do, which means most bites, when they happen, trace back to a hand that moved faster than it should have. Bites still happen. Experienced handlers describe a kind of fatigue that sets in after years of controlled risk, where the danger becomes routine right up until the day it is not, which is exactly the same sentence you will hear from the sulfur miners and the smoke jumpers on this channel. The antivenom made from this work saves an enormous number of lives every year in regions where snakebite remains a serious public health problem, largely unnoticed by anyone who has never needed it, which is most people reading a label without ever asking where the contents came from. Number 4 chases something that cannot be caught, only intercepted. Storm chasers, some of them scientists and some of them independent, drive into the American plains every spring specifically to get close to tornadoes, in order to gather data on wind speed, pressure, and structure that cannot be collected any other way. Specialized vehicles carry sensor packages designed to be driven directly into a tornado's path and left there, sacrificing the instrument for the reading. The chasers themselves are supposed to be somewhere else by the time it arrives, and the entire profession is built on the gap between supposed to and actually. That is what 1031 says. Positioning correctly takes constant recalculation, because a tornado's path is never a straight line, and a chase that looks safe from 10 kilometers away can close to uncomfortably little distance within a few minutes if the storm turns unexpectedly toward the road being used to escape it. The attention passengers also warn each other. A hazard spotted by one vehicle, a flooded road, or a downed power line gets radioed to everybody else in the area immediately, because out here the other chasers are often the only other help within reach. That 33 cents has a story about a storm that did something the models did not predict, changing direction or speed in a way that closed the gap they were relying on. The data collected this way has measurably improved warning times for people who will never know a chaser's name. Their 14 money passes, and the field and the forecasters back at a desk is what actually makes the warnings work. Ground truth from inside a storm radioed back in real time is still something no satellite fully replaces, which is the entire justification for driving toward the thing everyone else is told to drive away from. 3571 is a trade older than most of the technology on this list, and it is dying for a reason that has nothing to do with danger. Steeplejacks climb chimneys, church spires, and old industrial towers to repair brickwork, replace lightning conductors, and take down structures that are no longer safe, often using iron rungs set into the brick generations ago and hand tools rather than powered equipment. There is frequently no scaffolding, wind visibly moving his clothing. There is frequently no scaffolding. The climb itself is the access up structures that can be well over 100 meters, built at a time when nobody expected anyone to climb them from the outside for maintenance decades later. And the trade is fading because the structures themselves are fading. Industrial chimneys are being demolished faster than new ones are built, so the remaining steeplejacks increasingly take structures apart rather than maintain them, which means the job is slowly working itself into retirement. Ask an experienced steeplejack why they stayed in a shrinking trade, and the answer is rarely about money. It is usually about the view and about being one of a genuinely small number of people alive who have ever seen their town from that particular angle, on that particular structure, at that particular height. B1 plus 4HAREI pass between climbers. Some of these structures have been climbed by the same handful of families for generations. And the knowledge of exactly which stones have loosened over 150 years is not written down anywhere. It exists only in whoever climbed it most recently. Please get married at 1970. What is left of the trade is passed on almost entirely by apprenticeship, one climber teaching another directly on the structure, because there is no simulator for 400-year-old brick that might or might not hold a hand's full weight. Number 6 kills more people through physics than through any dramatic accident, and it happens inside something that looks completely harmless. Grain behaves like quicksand. A person standing in flowing grain inside a silo can be pulled under in seconds, because grain does not support weight the way solid ground does, and once it closes over someone, the pressure alone can make breathing impossible even without full submersion. Dad knew 4 more tracks, and then 14.6 millimeters will be ever fully recognized. Rescue requires a specific tube lowered around the person to relieve the pressure before anyone can be pulled free. And even with the right equipment on site, rescues can take hours. Farmers and grain elevator workers train for this specifically because the entry itself, walking into your own workplace, is the dangerous part. Because real rescues are so time critical, many rural fire departments now train specifically for grain entrapment using dedicated rescue tubes and augers built for exactly this scenario. Equipment that sits unused in a truck for months and then becomes the only thing standing between a farmer and drowning in his own harvest. The rule that actually saves lives here is boring on purpose. Nobody enters a silo alone, and nobody enters while grain is moving. Most of the deaths on record happened when somebody broke exactly one of those 2 rules, usually to save a few minutes. -1-2, the rule sounds simple enough to be almost insulting to repeat, and safety trainers repeat it anyway, every season, because the deaths keep happening to people who already knew it and decided just this once that their situation was the exception. Most farmers who work around grain their whole lives never see an engulfment happen. That is precisely the danger. A hazard that only shows its full cost rarely is a hazard people stop taking seriously right up until the one day it matters. The warning stickers on these silos have said the same thing for decades in the same blunt language because the message has never needed updating. The physics has not changed. Only the number of people willing to ignore it has. Number 7, study something that is actively trying to set them on fire. Volcanologists collecting lava samples at active volcanoes like Kilauea and Nyiragongo work in reflective proximity suits designed to survive radiant heat for short periods, close enough to dip a sampling pole directly into the flow. The heat is only one hazard. Volcanic gas can be lethal in concentrations too low to smell, and monitoring equipment is checked as carefully as the suit itself, because the gas cloud that kills you gives almost no warning before it does. Bedea of Second South, JT331 crater rims collapses behind them. Crater rims collapse without notice. Several volcanologists have died over the decades doing precisely this work, and the ones who continue describe an odd kind of intimacy with a specific mountain, watching it for years and learning its individual moods the way a sailor learns one particular sea. Long-term monitoring stations near active volcanoes are staffed in rotations precisely so nobody spends too long in a place where the background hum of ordinary risk can quietly become the new normal. Complacency is treated as its own hazard, tracked and managed the same way a gas reading is. And communities often live closer to these volcanoes than the scientists studying them, which means the monitoring work is not academic. A change in the data can mean the difference between an ordinary evacuation notice and one that comes too late for a town at the base of the mountain. Between the dramatic footage, most of the actual work is sitting with instruments, watching numbers shift slightly day to day, because the eruption that kills someone is almost never a surprise to the data. It is a surprise to whoever ignored it. Number 8 sets off explosions on purpose before dawn, to prevent a much bigger explosion of snow later in the day. Avalanche control specialists trigger deliberate small avalanches on unstable slopes, using hand-thrown charges, pole-mounted charges, or remote gas-powered systems, releasing the snow under controlled conditions before skiers or a highway full of cars are anywhere near it. Some of this work still means skiing out alone onto the exact slope being assessed, reading the snowpack by feel and by the sound underfoot, and placing a charge on ground that could, in theory, go before the person placing it is clear. The entire point of the job is that it works quietly. A controlled release nobody notices means a road stayed open and a resort stayed safe, and the specialists measure success by how little attention their most dangerous mornings ever receive. Reading a snowpack means digging a pit and examining the layers by hand, feeling for the weak point that could let the whole slope go. It is slow, unglamorous work that happens hours before the charges, and it is the part that actually decides where those charges get placed. Search dogs trained for avalanche debris are part of the same operation, ready in case a slope releases with someone still on it despite every precaution taken. Most patrollers hope, every single season, that the dog is never actually needed for real. W63, water cuff 500 miles out of the desk. Number 9 goes further down than almost anywhere else on this channel, into water that would crush an unprotected body instantly. Submersible pilots taking vessels to the deepest ocean trenches, including the Mariana Trench, work inside spheres built to withstand pressure roughly 1,000 times that of the surface, in a cabin barely large enough for 2 or 3 people. The image to me outside the hull is complete darkness and cold, barely above freezing. Communication with the surface ship is slow and limited. If something fails at full depth, there is no rescue that arrives in time, which is a fact every pilot accepts before the hatch is sealed. Instruments in hand, every dive begins with hours of inspection, because at that depth there is no meaningful difference between a small flaw and a catastrophic one. The pressure does not negotiate with a component that is 99% sound. And the dive itself, down and back, can take most of a day, most of it spent simply waiting while the vessel does the one thing it is built to do: survive pressure that would flatten a person instantly. Everyone on the support ship above spends that same day doing the same thing from the other direction, watching a signal on a screen and waiting for it to surface, because for hours at a time there is genuinely nothing anyone topside can do to help if something goes wrong below. Dat of all the dark station over. For record attempts, that same tracking signal is often shared publicly, which means a pilot's family can end up watching the same small dot on a map as strangers on the internet, waiting through the same silence for the same number of hours. Don't rest a Cybran speed manual. Number 10 hunts an animal that was never supposed to be there in the first place. In the Florida Everglades, invasive Burmese pythons have no natural predators and have devastated native wildlife populations. Contracted hunters go out at night, on foot, and by airboat, searching the undergrowth for a snake that is extremely well camouflaged and can grow well over 5 meters. 7,253 seconds. Capture is done by hand. There is no shooting in dense habitat full of other wildlife, so a hunter locates the snake, pins the head, and controls an animal capable of overpowering an unprepared person. In the dark, in water, surrounded by everything else that also lives in a Florida swamp. The hunts are paid partly by length, which means the incentive rewards exactly the animals that are hardest and most dangerous to bring in. Alligators, snakes, and biting insects are simply the other tenants of the workplace, and every hunter treats them as such. Most nights produce nothing at all. A python this well camouflaged can be a few meters away and invisible, so the job is mostly hours of searching for a result that may never come, which is a fact every contract hunter accepts long before the first successful capture. The swamp itself does not care which animal a hunter is looking for. Alligators, venomous snakes that are not the target, and biting insects in enormous numbers are simply the tax paid for every single night spent out there, successful or not. Captured pythons are examined for what they reveal about the invasion itself, stomach contents showing exactly what native species are being lost. The hunt is part removal, part ongoing research into an ecological problem that has no clean solution, only slower loss. Number 11 arrives when an oil well has already gone wrong in the worst possible way. Blowout and well fire specialists are called in when a well fire cannot be extinguished by conventional means. Walking toward a jet of burning gas and oil that can be louder than a jet engine and hot enough to ignite equipment from a distance most people would consider safe. But a Big Flicks method uses a precisely placed explosive charge to starve the fire of oxygen for a fraction of a second, extinguishing it in a single controlled blast, after which the crew has only a short window to cap the well before the escaping gas can reignite. This trade has produced some of the highest day rates of any job on this list, for the obvious reason that very few people are qualified to do it, and even fewer want to. Specialist firms of this kind are called out perhaps a few dozen times a year worldwide, and each call means walking toward the exact thing everyone else on the site is retreating from. Edinburgh, there's very little celebration. Afterward, there is very little celebration. Crews describe packing up and moving to the next job with the same flat calm they arrived with, because treating the work as extraordinary, even after it goes right, is the first step toward treating the next one as ordinary before it has earned that. Every job is studied afterward in detail. Because each well fire behaves slightly differently, and the industry's entire safety record depends on learning something new from a job that by definition nobody wants to have needed in the first place. And Edinburgh will visit the platform of past jobs as from learn as much from the archive of past jobs as from live training, because the number of real incidents worldwide in any given year is small enough that nobody gets to practice on the genuine article very often. Number 12 happens at the edge of where air stops behaving like air. 85-10 parachutists ascend by balloon to altitudes where the atmosphere is too thin to breathe unaided, wearing pressure suits closer to spacewear than skydiving gear, and then step off the platform into a fall that begins in near silence because there is almost no air to make noise. The most dangerous phase is not the jump. It is the risk of an uncontrolled flat spin in the thin upper atmosphere, spinning fast enough to be lethal before the body reaches denser air where control becomes possible again. Programs test pressure suits and parachute systems this way specifically because there is no other way to test them. Bodedragon. Freefall from this altitude can approach the speed of sound before the thicker atmosphere below provides enough resistance to slow things down, which makes this one of the very few jobs on this channel where the danger is not heat, cold, or an animal, but simply how fast a human body can fall. A ground team tracks the fall in real time, calling out altitude and rotation, ready to trigger a reserve system remotely if the jumper cannot. For the length of that fall, the person making every decision about their own survival is, for a short stretch, not entirely the person doing the falling. Every jump is reviewed frame by frame afterward, because a spin that started to develop and was corrected in time looks, on paper, identical to one that would not have been, and the difference between the two is measured in fractions of a second nobody wants to leave to chance next time. The data from these jumps feeds directly into the suits worn by pilots and, eventually, astronauts, which means a person falling alone through near silence at the edge of the atmosphere is, in a very literal sense, testing the equipment that keeps someone else alive somewhere else entirely. Number 13 means commuting by helicopter to a platform surrounded by open ocean, then climbing higher still. Offshore wind turbine technicians service structures that stand well over 100 meters above the water, reached by boat transfer or winch from a helicopter, in conditions where the weather window to work safely can close within hours. Then nacelle at the top, turbine blades sweeping past close to the hatch. Inside the nacelle at the top, technicians work beside moving blades the length of a football pitch, in a structure that sways slightly even when everything is functioning correctly. If the weather turns before the work is finished, getting back down safely can mean waiting it out at height. Sometimes the fastest way down is not the internal ladder at all, but a controlled rope descent on the outside of the tower, which trades one risk for another. Speed against exposure, decided in the moment by the technician actually feeling the wind rather than by a rule written in an office. Methodical, unhurried, every climb starts with the two technicians checking each other's equipment in silence. A habit repeated so many times it has stopped feeling like a formality, because the person most likely to miss something on your own harness is you. Boats struggle against rising swell below, and getting on and off the platform is often the riskiest part of the entire day. Transfer vessels have to match the platform's motion closely enough for a person to step across safely, and a swell that looks manageable from a boat can turn that single step into the most dangerous moment of the job. Technicians plan their entire day around a return window that can move without warning. Getting stranded overnight on a platform is not a catastrophe, but it is common enough that everyone carries supplies for exactly that possibility, every single shift. And the last one burns underground, sometimes for longer than anyone alive has been. 99% of coal seam fires, like the one that has burned beneath Centralia in Pennsylvania for decades, can smolder for generations. And firefighters and mine engineers who work to contain them operate in heat, toxic gas, and structurally unstable ground, often unable to see the fire they are fighting at all. Carbon monoxide is the immediate killer here, not flame, and it gives almost no warning before it does its damage. Crews work in short shifts with constant gas monitoring, aware that the ground beneath them can also simply give way into a fire they cannot see, getting them to pay off the town's empty streets and tend attention. Some of these fires have outlasted the towns built above them. Containing one is not usually about extinguishing it. It is about managing where it goes next for a problem with a timeline measured in decades rather than days. Therefore, the grain shadows gathering traveled over 398 million. Comparing the burn spread, some of these underground fires were recorded burning before the engineers now managing them were born. And the honest professional answer, when asked when it will finally go out, is often that nobody currently working the case expects to see the end of it. Cases like this are handed down between engineers the way a family passes down a house. One career ending with the fire still burning, and the next one beginning exactly where the last file left off. Engineers map the fire's slow movement using boreholes and temperature readings, essentially drawing a map of something that cannot be seen, in order to warn whoever is living or working above where the ground might weaken next. Pause here because the pattern from the last video applies again, and it is worth naming before we finish. WMTMMHLYCE, RTWLBLX bomb suit and blast site on the other. None of these 15 are chosen for thrill. The bomb technician does this because somebody has to, and it pays better than most alternatives with that level of training. The ice road trucker drives because a community needs supplies before the ice melts. The venom handler shows up because anti-venom does not make itself. And in every one of these jobs, the actual skill is not bravery, it is calm. The steeplejack, the volcanologist, the submersible pilot, and the bomb technician all describe the same thing when asked what keeps them alive. Not being fast, being unhurried, on purpose in a situation built to make anyone hurry. These Andres trades reward speed the way almost every other modern job does. There is no bonus for finishing the bomb, the dive, the climb, or the extraction faster than the person who did it yesterday. The only metric that matters here is whether everyone involved is still standing at the end, which is a strange kind of job to be measured by, and also the only fair one. JALNBERA, 15 more jobs on 5 continents. From the edge of space to a kilometer of frozen water and a coal fire that has been burning since before some of these workers were born. None of them are extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. They are ordinary people who learned a specific, narrow, difficult skill, and then went back and did it again the next day, because the work does not stop needing to be done just because it is dangerous. Bed Sheldon, if you welcome the countryside from noon your escape ordinance, and almost none of them would describe themselves as brave. Ask enough of them, and the word that comes up instead, again and again, across every language and every one of these 15 trades, is simply competent. They know exactly what they are doing, and that more than anything else is the actual armor. Light switch, a map, a bag of grain, a bottle of anti-venom. And here is the thread connecting this list to the first one. Every one of these jobs also exists because something downstream needs it. A cleared bomb means a street reopens. A capped well means the spill stops spreading. Anti-venom means a snakebite in a village somewhere does not become a death. The distance between the danger and the benefit is short, and almost nobody on the receiving end ever thinks about who did the work. Most of the people who benefit from this list will never know it happened. The street reopens, the flight lands, the antidote works, and life simply continues, which is in a strange way the actual definition of these jobs succeeding. Nobody outside them ever has a reason to notice. So, same question as always. Of these 15, which one could you actually do? Not once for a video, every week for years. Tell me in the comments, and tell me honestly which one you ruled out first. If you have not seen the other jobs on this channel yet, or the 15 places nobody should be able to live in, they are both on screen now. Thanks for watching.